One-shots are frustrating. At their best, it can feel like you made a really skillful play, or maybe you just got outplayed really hard. But at their worst, it feels like there really is no counterplay to them sometimes, and it skews the game too much in one person's favor. So, just to open up this conversation, I've been pretty anti-one-shot for the majority of Overwatch 2. Now, at the very, very beginning, I remember being like, well, we've had one-shots forever, and I think it's perfectly fine. The more that I played Overwatch 2, the more that I realized that I think one-shots are just not so healthy for the game of Overwatch 2, just because it is different, and there's less mitigation and everything. But really, I kind of started to think at that point that one-shots were really never healthy, at least how good they have been in the past. And it was only more of like, you could get by a little more because there was more mitigation, right? It was like a bad, unhealthy thing for the game, but the blow was lessened a little bit. So I have been really pro refixing one-shots and initially removing them entirely. But after the 225 hero patch, where Hanzo and Junkrat reclaim their one-shots against certain heroes, I started to turn a bit of a new leaf about what I think about one-shots, because I found, at least with Hanzo, that the 225 or one-shotting 225 HP heroes was actually really a really interesting dynamic to have, because those are the characters that Hanzo is particularly weak to. So he is allowed to one-shot them. They have to make a risky play to kill him, basically. And I think that is totally fine, because if you are playing those characters correctly, you're not going to be playing in a choke. You're not going to be playing around corners where Hanzo will be spamming and get rando spammed. If you are actively engaging the Hanzo, he has to make a skill shot on you. So it is your risk that is causing you to get one shot. It's not just completely random. And then the characters that don't do that, that play a little more closer to the core, they play around corners, they play main a lot more often, they don't get one shot like that. And I think that was like a really good middle ground solution for Hanzo without completely reworking him. And so with that kind of dynamic in mind, I was thinking like, maybe there are some instances where the one shots are only conditional to certain types of characters or certain types of situations that are going on that make it much more fair, and talk more or focus more on characters taking risks or having something set up rather than just rando spam or having it up all the time against every single person. But I also talked about how Junkrat had very similar changes, and the problem being is that Junkrat feels way less satisfying and good to hit. One, it's way easier to do, and two, it's a little more guaranteed because of the proximity to him that you have to be, right? So basically, Junkrat was a lot less interesting to me, because it's just like, well, Junkrat can one-shot you if you're within a certain radius to him. It's consistent, it's easy to hit. It's a little frustrating because it doesn't feel like there's the skill to it. You just kind of like, it's really more about you messed up and they didn't make a good play, which there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I think with Hanzo, it is both of those things. And to me, that doesn't feel really bad. It just feels like, well, they played better than me and I played bad. And with Junkrat, it's more of like, oh, I missed like part of my clip, or I barely missed my melee and I just completely hard explode for it, right? It's just so volatile either way that I really don't like the interaction that it causes there. So basically, what I've written down here is, I think the problem with one-shots is that there is no problem for being punished for your mistakes, but the counterplay, there's no problem to being punished for your mistakes, right? I think that's totally fine. But the counterplay to the one-shots being unfun is where a lot of the problems lie, right? I think that if you are playing around a one-shot, that is a perfectly fine gameplay loop, but it shouldn't be an extremely game-mending interaction. It shouldn't make you play in a way that is just not fun, right? So think about like on sniper maps. Widow holds a lot of the cards And it is a much more difficult task to get onto her, and it takes a way longer amount of time. And if you mess up any tiny little step along the way, she gets to just kill you. She just gets to win that interaction, right? And to me, that doesn't seem right. It seems like you have to play so much better than them compared to what they have to do, right? They're in a good position of power. You have to try and take that from them. Plus you have to stay out of their LOS. Plus you have to stay out of the LOS of other people. They just get to sit there. And if they're watching and they're mindful, they get to counter rotate you. So you have to do it multiple times, which is really frustrating, right? Because they do, again, hold a lot of the power in that situation, right? And if you don't know exactly where they are when navigating, you could just randomly get shot anyways, because in most situations, people would not know that you're there or you'd be safe, but they could just have that one angle on you that it's just they saw you in a split second and they got you, right? Basically, the fact is that, like, you are getting punished, and there's nothing wrong for getting punished. But the fact that the interaction is so skewed is what makes it so frustrating. Yes, once you actually do it, what can Widow really do? Well, she has to hit the miracle shot. But getting to that position just really is not fun. And honestly, if they're able to get onto you, that interaction just feels like, well, I lost, right? Which that is a little more on you for not being able to recognize that and not being able to punish them properly. But it just isn't a very fun interaction. It's not a fun duel, anything like that. It's just this super skewed, asymmetrical type of interaction that I just don't really like, right? So think about things like Widow finding a cheap angle that you wouldn't ever be able to, like, shoot her back from. You know, like, think about circuit first/second, where you can crouch under the gate or like the little fence, and there's that tiny little gap between them where you can shoot through. That just is not fun or interactable at all, right? There's no real counterplay to that unless you have a hit scan that can shoot through those grates as well. Junkrat hiding in a door, hiding in like a door frame, right? Overwatch is not a tactical game. Typically, you don't expect people to be hiding most of the time unless they, unless they died late and they're trying to survive. So most people don't check corners or do anything like that in Overwatch because, frankly, it's just not very fun, and it's not a skill that you need to know, because the game is much more about team fights and knowledge rather than random, places that you didn't check, because, that's not quite how Overwatch typically works. There's typically areas of the map where you guys own and they own. But if Junkrat is just hiding in the back somewhere, it's the same thing of like spawn camping with Sombra, right? Where it's just like, well, this isn't so beyond frustrating, because why would you reasonably be there, Junkrat? Why would a Junkrat be there? It's just no fun to have to check every single corner. And even if you do check all your corners, Junkrat still has the cards there. Like, the counterplay to that is bad. Now, is that a really good option for Junkrat? Not really, right? He puts himself completely out of position and stuff like that, but it's frustrating. It is super frustrating because even though it's a bad option, it is still an option that exists in the game that is just really not fun at all to fight against. There is really no good counterplay to it. So basically, what I want to talk about this video is not complaining about one-shots and stuff like that. I want to give general solutions and ideas to help make one-shots less frustrating, alleviate some of the problems we have with one-shots, because in my opinion, I think one-shots have a place in Overwatch. One, a lot of character identity is revolved around them. Even if you were to rework them, I think that one-shots need to exist in their kit in some way. Think about Widowmaker, for example. I think a one-shot is crucial to her game feel. But in my opinion, they need to be less consistent and happen less frequently. I think there should be a lot of conditional variables to getting a one-shot up, right? Maybe a second step, maybe a status effect included, maybe getting some damage in, a combo that has a little bit of time in between it so that there is some way for someone else to help save you or for you to save yourself, anything like that, right? I want the counterplay to be trying to prevent the other character from being able to one-shot more so than always having to play around that one-shot, right? I think playing around the one-shot is fine, but always having to play around the one-shot just makes it really frustrating and really uninteractable with a lot of characters. But if there are certain times where the one shot is up, much less often, then that interaction can still exist. But then you have another way of playing around that one shot. It's trying to prevent that character from being in a position where they can one shot you, right? It's not an easy fix. It would be character by character basis. You would have to really change a lot of how their kits work just to make it reasonable. But I think it is definitely something that we should look into, right? Shifting power elsewhere to make the one shot less frequent while making the characters more useful on average, I think is a really good thing. Thing about Widowmaker, right? She has a lot of abilities that are pretty weak. It is just her primary fire is so good. So yes, there is the thing about that also is that the character has no power spike or no fantasy spike. All of their cards are in primary fire. So the entire time, the only time you get that extra juice of adrenaline or like something fun happened is when you hit a really crazy mechanical skill one shot. There's no like, you know, if you just hit like a bunch back to back to back, they all kind of feel the same, right? An example I have for Widow is like, what if Venomine was buffed a little bit? It had a couple of different things, and then Widow could only one shot if Venomine was active on somebody, right? That way, there is a condition to it. You know exactly when you could be one shot. There's ways to outplay it, ways to play around it. You can break the Venomine, you can look for them, stuff like that. But it also gives Widow more usefulness mid-fight and have other things to do with Venomine. So now she has different ways to use her kit, and she's less linear. She has more things that she could do. It could be a nice middle ground. It also would give you that oomph back to your kit, right? So you would have some sort of like power spike where, okay, now it feels better for Widow to have the one shot because she can't always one shot, right? So when you hit those one shots and you get them, it feels better for you as the Widow player. So it's not just a solution for playing against one shots, it's also a solution for playing with one shots, you know? It goes both ways. I think it just makes everyone have more fun overall. It's much more interactable. There's more depth to all these interactions. That is just one idea I have. Obviously, by no means do I think that is like the only way you could do it. There's plenty of stuff you can do. People always talk about what if it did damage over time, stuff like that. There's so many different ways that you could go about it. But basically, yeah, that is what I think. Basically, I think that one-shots just need to not exist all the time. They do not need to be always active, because that is just a really unfun way to play around those abilities, right? One-shots can exist in Overwatch 2. They should exist in Overwatch 2, but they should be closer to like Rhine Pin, where there is a lot of counterplay to it, and it's kind of just like an extra. It's not even like always the best option to go for, because Pin has other uses. So then there's also other ways to use those abilities, and that also kind of brings the uptime of those abilities down, because there are going to be situations where it's better to use it for other purposes, right? I think that Rhine Pin is a perfect example. Shatter is also a decent example. I'm not the biggest Reinhardt fan in the world, but I think his one-shots are pretty fair and not that frustrating overall. So yeah, that's what I have to think. What do you think about one-shots in Overwatch 2? Do you have any ideas about how to fix certain characters' one-shots or one-shot combos in this game? I particularly didn't talk about Roadhog in this video, because that's a whole other can of worms that is crazy hard to deal with, but I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. Like and subscribe while you're at it and you're still here on YouTube. I really appreciate it. This was streamed live, twitch.tv/Lane Hemingway. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays is when I stream. There's always something to talk to me about. And join my Discord if you want to send me a replay code to look at, send me a hot take, or just generally talk Overwatch. I do like hearing back from you guys like that. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good day.